Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of All in the Name of Growth. I'm really excited for today's episode. It's something that I've actually been looking forward to for a while. It's taken Cobin and I a little bit to coordinate this, but I'm really excited to have Cobin Soelberg on today. He is an anesthesiologist and also a financial planner. He specializes mostly in helping doctors, but I kind of strong-armed him in today and getting on and talking to us about just financial planning in general and about money really in general, and kind of like why people have such a strong opinion, I guess, either way about what money is and how that kind of manifests in our lives and stuff. So Cobin, thank you so much for getting on. I know things are kind of crazy there, but I appreciate it.
Thank you, Krista. I really appreciate you having me on. And we had such a great conversation a few weeks ago. So I've been, like you said, I've been looking forward to this as well. So
yeah, good. I'm glad. So we are just going to jump straight head into what we're going to talk about today, because I know that there's a lot there that we can unpack and I want to make it, value packed for everybody. So my first question is, why do you think people have either they just have very strong opinions about money, right? Like there are so many quotes out there about money, about how it can make you evil or how, being rich can be bad, and all of a lot of them does surround negativity, that rich people are fill in the blank, right? Like we have these things. Why is that?
I think a lot of it, money is one of those things. It's sort of like water or the air we breathe. It's always around, right? In the background. And, as we talked about a few weeks ago, I think we all have money stories that we grow up with. And we absorb all of this as we're growing up in our family. And, as kids, we're really just sponges. We're picking up all this information, but there's not really context for it. So we don't know whether or not it's true, but as a kid, that's our reality. And so, you could grow up in a very poor household where the story you hear is that money is really hard to come by. And in order to get it, you have to, do something nefarious or be really, bad to your employees. Or you could see when you're having a bad day, what helps solve that is you spend a lot of money. And all of us pick this up. We just absorb it. We literally just absorb it as kids, and we never question it. And it's really only once we get to being an adult, and I think even more than that, when you start interacting with other people, so that could be a spouse or a partner, and your money stories collide, is when you first start saying, oh, people think about this much, much differently than I do. And for me, at least, that was when I started waking up to it. So it's so funny because we really do. We just pick it up as kids and never question it.
Yeah, I would definitely agree that is true. I know that in the conversations that I've had with people, that is definitely when I was a kid, blah, 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 that's where it all comes from. And it's interesting as adults that's like you say, we hang on to that, but we don't really address that. So we're gonna kind of come back around to this. But first, I wanted to ask, what are some common ways that you see that these kinds of things manifest as adults? You talked about that conversation about sometimes we don't even recognize it until worlds collide. Yeah. What are some of those kind of different things? Because I think that some people maybe don't even realize the beliefs that they have because maybe it hasn't collided with somebody that's different than them. So what are some of those examples of ways that, maybe people could be like, oh, I guess I am kind of like that?
So I think, thinking about some of the clients that I work with. So as a physician, you go to college, then med school, then residency. So you're looking at 10 to 12, maybe even longer in terms of training. And the majority of students, like 70 to 80%, are borrowing money, and they're borrowing a lot of money, like several $100,000. And what I found interesting is they become so immune to that debt that as they're getting close to graduating and making what we think of as like doctor money, they'll go out and buy $1 million house or buy like a brand new BMW, or not thinking twice about what that debt does to them, and understanding that means they owe the bank and someone owns their time. Or just, thinking about, when you're stressed, or how you feel about having money in the bank, and some of that, the fear that might be like, I always need to have $10,000 in my checking account so that I feel okay. Or conversely, I think what I find interesting, especially for a lot of people who grew up without a lot, is if they ever get money, they just spend it because they don't know when they'll get it again. They want that dopamine hit that you get to feel better. And when you back up and unpack that a little bit, all those things actually make a lot of sense, right? Um, One of the books we had talked about earlier is from Morgan Housel called The Psychology of Money. And Morgan is one of the best financial writers out there because he just tells stories. He tells these phenomenal stories. And he makes this point about money is for everyone who does something that seems crazy, for them, it makes sense in the time. And when you approach it with that sort of curiosity and kindness, it's really fun to start unpacking that. And instead of being defensive about it, people start opening up, and that's when you can start working on it.
Yeah. So what are, I find, as a financial planner, obviously we're talking about, or you talk a lot about having a plan.
Right.
And I was having a conversation with a woman the other day that I was coaching through some money stuff that she has, that she's experiencing in her life. And one of the things that I had talked to her about is that a lot of people think that they're going to go from poverty to prosperity without ever understanding that there has to be stability in between there. And so how, when you talk about financial planning, what does that look like to, create stability? What is really just like kind of the basic building blocks of what that looks like?
Great question. And I really do like that, the way you frame that with, sort of that, almost like a platform, right, of stability where you can start making better decisions. But to me, it's all about insight. And so it's one of those things that for most people, even amongst planners, like they just don't like talking about money, but that's what it requires, I think, more than anything else, is sort of shining a flashlight on what's actually going on. So who do you owe money to? Who are you responsible for taking care of? Who is dependent on you for income? And then you can drill down and be like, how are we spending our money on a month-to-month basis? And it's not, I don't even mean like a budget right then. I just mean sort of doing a deep dive of what's coming in and what's going out. And that in and of itself can be pretty stress inducing, I think, for most people. But it gives us a sense of where we're starting. And that's all that matters, actually, is we're actually reflecting on that with some honesty and transparency. And this is where we are. And then we can start making different decisions.
Yeah, I appreciate that a lot. The just getting real about it. Two of my kind of favorite quotes about this situation as well. One, first, you can't fix what you don't acknowledge, right? You can't, if you don't even know what's happening. And also that which is measured increases. And if you don't understand what's actually happening there, then the cycle of you continuing to like the example that you had given about the doctors getting out of residency and buying $1 million house or, a fancy car, that they don't even understand what's happening there with their input and output to be able to have even a place to come at it from an objective, factual place. And this was, kind of the guidance that I had given the gal the other day, was just that if you don't understand where you're starting from, how are you ever going to get to where you want to be? How do you ever even, and when we take it at just a factual base, like this is just the facts, this is what you're spending every month, and this is what you're bringing in every month, it kind of takes away those beliefs and puts them almost in the back seat. That's like, this is not the primary problem. The primary problem is the actual situation that's staring me in the face.
So true. And it's, and the thing that I would tell all your listeners, really, when you're doing this, approach it with curiosity. It's so easy to get judgmental and be like, oh man, I can't believe I spent that much going out or that much shopping. Leave all that. That's not helpful, for one, but get curious and think, a much more interesting question is, why was I spending that money? And the other piece of it, this comes up a lot in Your Money or Your Life. One thing that Vicki Robbins, that author, makes is, if you really drill down and look at how you spend your money, That'll tell you what you value. And I think the same is true with how you spend your time. And so this is a chance to say, is my spending in alignment with the things that I tell myself and tell the people around me that I value? And
Mm,
it's it's crystal clear. And again, it doesn't need to be a judgmental thing, but like you said, it's just, we need to know what's real instead
yeah,
of those stories going on in our heads. Like, no, we're doing fine. I got, we have plenty of money. It's not a big deal. And
yeah,
you look at it and you realize, wow, why am I spending money this way? It doesn't bring me any joy. It's not
right.
bringing me closer to my goals.
Yeah, yeah, it's a really good point. And the thing that I had talked to her about, in all of this is because she's always been like kind of budget averted. She didn't want to create a budget. She always felt like it was
Sure.
very, very restricted to have a budget. And I said, the thing that I've done and that I recommend people do is we just have a spreadsheet and it just says like, this is our outgoing every month. These are the mortgage or the rent, these are the truck payments or automobile payments. This is the insurance. This is the credit cards. This is, we just have a spreadsheet that just lays it all out. And this is
Yep.
what I recommended to her, which is go through the last couple of months, add up all the money that they spend on food, basically, or on
Yeah.
gas, on all of those extra things. And like you said, I love that you had recommended that this isn't a place for judgment. It's just a
No.
place for recognition. And she actually told me at the end of the conversation, I actually feel like this is an opportunity to become more free than restricted. And I'm like, that's the name of the game. That's what we're
Oh,
going for, is to just be able to look at our money as a tool, not as a tool that's, that we're not the tool of the money, that the money
right.
is the tool of us. So now, as people are going through this, and there can be some emotional aspects of this when you start looking at money and you start looking at your outgoing and your incoming, and getting real about your financial situation, it can be overwhelming for some people. So, what is your belief surrounding whether or not it's possible to fix any financial situation?
Oh, it absolutely is. It absolutely is. I mean, there's, you know, some of them are more painful than others. Some of them some of them may cause a little more restriction than others. But, I think there's two ways to go about it, right? Like, you can cut and scrimp and do those sorts of things and like stop spending money. The other thing you can do, which is way more fun and way more enlarging, is to expand your income. And most of the time it's a combination of both those things. It's very rare that it's one or the other. But part of the reason that first step is so important is now you know where you're starting. And basic human psychology, it's really hard to take things away from us. It feels really, really, really painful. And so, and not only that, there's only, like, again, you need a place to live, right? You need food in your fridge. You need clothes on your back. Like, there's only so many things you can cut out of your life. Um, I think it's so much more fun to be like, okay, so how do we increase your income? What can we do? Can we sell a few things in your house? Can we train for a different job? Are there other things like that? And, for a lot of people, that's the first time that they've given themselves permission to sort of dream in that way and think bigger. It's what the woman you were just working with said, like, she came to that realization on her own, which is phenomenal. I love that.
Yeah.
But she's like, it's freedom. It's freedom. And that really is what I think it means for most of us. And it can be. And once you can work from that mindset, you really start to see what's possible in a much different way.
Yes, yes, absolutely. It's so true. And I love that you talked about the difference between cutting back versus creating more. And anybody that's listened to my podcast for any length of times knows that I'm all about the big dreams and about, creating more and about being in control and all of those
Yeah.
things. So, when I look at, just like you said, it's painful to have things taken away. When I look at my life and I'm like, okay, well, do I want to give up my beach vacation that I take a couple times a year, or do I want to create more money? Right? Like, I
Yeah.
want to create more money. I don't want to have to give up my vacation. That's my time to connect with my family and to
Right.
leave my own stress. And it helps me to be in a better mindset. Like, it just helps all the way around in
Sure.
the things that I actually do value. And so I love that you drew that illustration for people to understand that there's a way to create more money.
For sure. Well, and the thing I would add, Christy, it's what I think is really helpful is cutting clutter. And that can be mental clutter, like thoughts and beliefs that are helpful. And all of us, I know you just like I do. I look around my house and I'm like, I have too much stuff here. Like so much of this stuff doesn't actually make me happy, doesn't bring me joy. It's just in the way. Getting rid of that actually can create that space to really do the big things on the creation part. So that piece I think is actually really important. But it's not, I don't think it should ever be about cutting the stuff that brings you joy.
Right.
I mean, that's a recipe for disaster. Who wants to do that?
Yeah, no, that just sounds like depression to me.
Right?
Yeah, yeah. I really appreciate that you brought that up again, that it reminds me of in the movie The Secret, they were talking about the relationship aspect. There's a point where they're talking about if you want to have a relationship, a better relationship in your life, you have to make room for it. You know, like
Yeah.
if you decide you want to get married, is there room in your garage for another person? Is there room in your closet for another person? Is there room in your life for another person? And so we can translate that over into a money aspect of it, right? Like, is there room in your beliefs for more money? Is there room in your life for abundance? Or are your thoughts going to block everything that tries to present itself, which is a huge factor in actually being able to create more.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I know we've touched on this a little bit as we've become adults and we have these beliefs or correlations to what money is from our childhood.
Mhm.
How do we, I mean, it's one thing to just sit down and say, okay, I'm going to get factual about this, but I also
Sure.
know there is a mental aspect of it that we have to really
Absolutely.
address and overcome. So what are your recommendations on people being able to kind of get over that?
That's a great question. And, there's a few things that I think can help. And again, if you're in a relationship or have others that you are responsible for money, this is a great chance to sit down with everyone and ask these questions. But two of the ones that I think are really helpful, and they go along together, but what role does money play in your life? And why is money important to you? Um, and I think what you want to do is keep digging. Like, don't take the first answer and don't even take the second answer. Go a few, like at minimum, ask why 3 times and maybe 5 times before you start to get really uncomfortable. And, as we were talking about before we started recording today, it's been a heck of a week at our house, and our dog had to have surgery today. And she's super young. She's only 3. And the thing that I'm so grateful for, Christy, is when we found out, it wasn't even a stress at all to think, like, can we afford to pay for this surgery? Like, do we have to make that decision to save this dog that we just adore and love? Like, that wasn't even on the radar. And we also had the heating guys out this week too, and we have to replace our whole HVAC. And it's like, we've been putting money away for a couple of years, just not for this, but for anything that just sort of like rains out of the sky and like, breaks. And it's such a relief to know that we were planning for, bad things to happen. We know they're going to happen. And it's so nice to be able to just focus on each other and focus on those relationships that are important instead of, oh my gosh, how are we going to take care of this?
Right.
And so it was really eye-opening and really gratifying for me to be like, this is why we do it.
Yes, yes. So you touched on 2 things there that I just want to rewind and go back to, is that the 2 questions you asked: what role does money play in your life and why is money important to you? I think that that's a really great way to kind of unpack where your ideas around money come from. I was talking to a friend and she said that her and her husband were having a conversation, and he had said something about, well, when we have more money, I don't want to live by those, rich people. And she's all, hold up. What do you mean by those rich people? And he's all, well, rich people are blah, 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 blah. And she's all, okay, well, can we like make a distinguishing difference here? Like, do you think that all rich people are that way? Or do you think that those people are just that way and money magnified it? And he was like, Well, no, I think that that's probably just the way that they are, and money magnified it. She's like, so when we have more money and we would be maybe classified as a rich person, is that who you're going to become? Like, and he's like, no way. And she's like, okay, well, that's a choice, right? And who we hang out with. But it's funny. It's so good to have those conversations though, because
It
when
is.
you don't recognize the thoughts you have in your head until you speak them out your mouth. And then especially
Right.
if somebody calls you on it and is like,
I love
hold
that
up.
she did. Yeah, I know. I love that she called them out.
Me too, me too. I was like, that's really great. It's a good eye opener. It's a good exercise to have, like you said, with somebody else, to talk about this, because I know for a lot of
Yeah,
people, it's a really uncomfortable
for
subject.
sure. For sure. And I mean, that's a really nice point, Christy, because it's when my wife and I first got married, this was the first time I had to be accountable to anyone for money. And we purposely sat down once a month. This was when we were repaying a ton of student loans and just sort of checked in, like, how are things going? How is the progress we're making? But I, I think that's really important to do, but you also want to make it fun. So like cook a nice dinner or go out to dinner or like do something fun together so you actually look forward to it. But those sorts of conversations are really, really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember when my husband and I were very first engaged, like 22, 23 years ago, sitting at a restaurant, going over our finances and how that was going to work when we blended together, and what that was going to look like. And are we having a joint checking account? Are we having separate checking accounts? How does that work for us?
Yeah,
And I'm not going to say that our life has been perfect financially, right? Like, we all have our learning opportunities, but
sure.
I think that that's the point, is that we learn from them, right? And that's what this whole conversation today is about looking at your situation and saying, okay, maybe I spent more than I should, maybe I'm not bringing in what I could, and figuring out a way, asking that question, how can I change this, instead of just saying it's hopeless and that there's no way of changing it. And there was actually something in there, I was gonna, like, 5 times I had this thought and then it kept escaping me.
Shoot.
One of the things is that I think for a lot of people, they don't understand the value in switching jobs. I
Yeah.
think that that's a huge way of being able to increase your income. So, for example, my husband, he's a software engineer. He has been for the last 15 years. He's self-taught, but in high demand. He is a brilliant developer. And years ago, we owned our own web development company. And then he went and got a job, and he was in just kind of at another web development company. And he quit that company and moved on to another one. And with every subsequent job change, it increased his wage. And the reason why is because a lot of times when an employee hires you, they view you as a, say, $60,000 a year employee. And so to increase your wage to $80,000 a year just seems like stupid on their part, because why would they pay you more to get the same work out of you that you've been doing? But when you go to a new company and you say, well, I've been making 60,000 and now I want to make 75,000, they're like, okay, that
Sure.
sounds good.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that that's the same thing that everybody's going to experience in their industry, because it's really a skill set, right? Like I said, he is a genius developer. But my point is that looking at a new job might be the best first step you can take
For sure.
in creating more money.
For sure. And there's actually been a lot written about that, right? In those two distinctions you made, that the people who are switching jobs, especially in the last couple of years, right, where we've seen a tremendous amount of job switching, are making substantially more than the people who sort of work up the ladder. So even if you work up the ladder, it's going to be much slower. You're not going to get those sorts of raises. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's certainly something to consider. I think it's a great way to do it. And again, it's part of it is taking the time and saying, what am I worth? What is my time worth? And asking for it.
Yeah,
I mean, what's the worst they
absolutely.
say? No.
No, it's no worse off than what you've got right now, right?
That's exactly right.
Yeah. Brilliant. Okay. Do you have any kind of parting thoughts, words of wisdom, anything, like a final thought that you want to wrap up with?
Yeah, thank you for giving that to me. It's, one of the things I was thinking about the last couple of days as I was preparing for this, Christy, is um, I think a lot of us, I know that I do this in many ways in my own life, live conditionally. And what I mean by that is we say things like, I'll be happy when I get married, or I'll be happy when I'm in the perfect relationship, or I'll be happy when I make $100,000, or I have $1 million saved. And that never stops. That treadmill never stops. Those goalposts never stop moving. And so, one of the most important things I think for all of us is to start accepting that we're enough now. That doesn't mean we're perfect. That doesn't mean we can't grow. That doesn't mean we can't earn more, but we're totally perfect just as we are. And this is what we have, this moment. And so choose to be happy now, choose to be grateful for what you have now. And when you come at it from that place of abundance, that you really do start seeing all those other things, whether it's close friends and family, whether it's earning more money. But choosing to be grateful for what you have right now allows you to continue growing. And so, that conditional living just never stops. And it's so destructive.
Yeah, I love that that's your final thought. My 11-year-old, he's so funny. We homeschool. And so I've allowed him to kind of set his schedule this year. He's old enough to know what he needs to work on and stuff. And so reading 30 minutes a day is one of his tasks that he's assigned for himself. And so he decided to go pick a book off of our bookshelf. And he picked up The Power of Starting Something Stupid, which is it's a business kind of book. And I love that. I was like, okay, that's
Okay.
it's a great book. It's so good. But today he was reading it, and he opened the page and he showed me, and he said, Mom, I think I need to do this. And I was like, what is that, buddy? And I went over there and he showed me this page and it said, obliterate the waiting room. And I thought it was really powerful, meaning that we always are sitting around waiting for that moment to be happy. We're waiting for that next opportunity.
Exactly.
We're waiting for, like we just hold ourselves in the waiting room rather than getting up and, maybe you're walking down the hallway. At least you're doing something. You're moving in a direction at least, right? I mean, as a doctor, I'm sure that kind of resonates because nobody likes to sit in the waiting room.
No, they do not.
I loved that. And I love what you're saying about having gratitude, because like we had talked about earlier, you can't have gratitude and anxiety. You can't have fear and faith at the same time. They just don't mix together. And
I love that.
As you're looking at your finances, I think that is a really great first place to start, is just recognizing the abundance that you already enjoy, and then getting real about your situation and figuring out how you can go from there and making that plan. So Cobin, how can people, I know that you specialize particularly in physicians, but if people wanted to come and follow you online, where could they do that at?
Sure. Yeah, I'm always happy. My financial planning firm is Greeley Wealth Management. And I'm sure you'll have that in the show notes so they can link to it from there. And I'm on Twitter. That, I would encourage anyone who's interested just to sign up for my email list, because the issues are not specific to physicians at all. It's a lot of it is like general, like, this is how we're thinking about money right now. Like, one of the newsletters I was just getting ready for this month is like staying in the market, right? Instead of jumping in and out because you're freaking out what's going on. Time in the market is what's most important. So they're very timely things for anyone at any stage of their like money position, investing, anything like that. And like I said, also on Twitter. So it's a lot. I just, as we talked about, I enjoy doing this because I like teaching and I want people to feel more comfortable and with money and their position with money. And I think that's true I think we'd all be better off if we were a little more honest about money and the role it plays.
Definitely. And recognize it as a tool.
Absolutely. Yeah, exactly.
That it's just something, I like to tell people all the time that money is an amplifier, it makes you more of who you already are, and so if you're concerned about it making you evil in some way, then the fact that you're even concerned about that is pretty much an indicator that that's never going to happen because you're worried about it. It's the people who are like, oh, I'm going to get money and go buy a Ferrari, and I'm going to go, all of these kind of off things with it, that maybe is the more concerning. And so anyways, I just really appreciate you getting on, sharing your wisdom. I think it's awesome what you're doing. And like I said, I mean, money is a hot topic, and for a lot of people, it's something that they shy away from. So I appreciate you bringing this, conversation and being able to have it so that people can kind of dip their toe in it a little bit and recognize that it doesn't have to be as painful as we make it out, maybe in our minds, that it can actually be very, very freeing if we just get real about it. So
And
thank you
fun.
for coming on. Yeah, and
You're
fun.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I always love having these conversations, Christy.
Perfect. All right, we'll catch up with you later.
All right, take care.